Vegas, Route 91. On October 1, 2017, a gunman in Las Vegas, Nevada, opened fire on a group of people attending the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. Without apparent motive, he murdered 60 people and wounded hundreds more. We had the chance to sit down with a group of first responders who were either directly responding to the incident or were instrumental in setting forth the changes in training that followed. This is the first time they had the chance to sit down and tell their story in their own words. I know some of the guys that were there, so I've had the chance to hear the stories. To say that these guys were appreciative of the chance to tell it is an understatement. Let's roll this. I hope you enjoy it. Episode 2, The Call. The Call. So this is the alert program coming to you out of Texas State University. And our podcast is being named The Call because as first responders and fire guys, we are known for answering the call as we go. And we never know what the call is going to be or what it's going to be or when it's going to come, but we're all ready to answer. And yes, I'm going to keep up the tradition of the strong rivalry between cops and firefighters, but we know in the end, pretty much we depend on each other. So I'm going to be careful about it just because Brian's sitting so close to me and he's a fire guy and he's a little bit bigger than me. So my name's Eddie Molina. I am the Southeast Regional Manager for the Alert Program. And I handle programming we're sending out training across the Southeast region. And we're starting up this podcast. And I'm going to be helping host this. I'm going to introduce my partner, Casey.
Casey Williams. I'm the e-learning program manager for Alert, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us.
Dean, how about you?
I'll try not to mess this up this time. I'm Dean Hennessy with Las Vegas Metro Police. Been with them for 21 years. I'm currently on the MACTAC section. I was one of the original officers to start the MACTAC section about 11 years ago.
Excellent. Any background in first response or military or anything like that?
I have no prior military, and I was a reserve police officer in Iowa for a couple of years before I moved out here.
Excellent. Jake?
Sergeant Jake Fisher. I'm a traffic sergeant now with Nevada Highway Patrol. Been with the patrol for just under 7 years. For the last 18 months, I was full-time with the MACTAC Task Force.
Excellent. And military or anything like that?
9 years U.S. Army, medical field, combat medic, 68 Whiskey, and then was a medical training sergeant for the state of Nevada.
And how long have you been on the state now?
Just under 7 years.
7 years. Okay, cool. Great. Travis?
Hi, my name is Travis Macca, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the Nevada Highway Patrol's Southern Command, everything in the southern part of Nevada. I've been on the department approximately 6 years. Prior to my time as the Public Information Officer, I spent the entirety of my career working urban traffic on the graveyard shift. I come from a law enforcement family locally. I'm born and raised in the Las Vegas community, and my whole background is based on things looking up to my parents who are in law enforcement. And I got to say, this is one of those careers where I feel that it was the first time in my life that I felt a sense of pride and purpose, where before I was making a lot more money prior to this career field. But I guess I'm just explaining why I may have a lot of gray hair, but only 6 years on the department.
Thanks, Travis. How about you, Brian?
I'm Brian O'Neill. I'm captain with the Clark County Fire Department. Just started my 19th year with the department, and I've been a paramedic here since 2006. I received the bid to the MACTAC section as a law enforcement liaison back in August of last year.
Excellent. Well, welcome. So also in the audience, we have Deputy Chief Warren Whitney out of the Clark County Fire Service. He has 26 years on. Thanks for being here. Bobby Chamberlain, 21 years on the Metro. Do you call it Metro Police Department, or is it just LV Metro?
Metropolitan Police Department.
Metropolitan Police. Okay, cool. All right, thank you. And Eric Jones, fire captain for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. Guys, thank you all for being here. So this recording is being done in Las Vegas, Nevada, inside the Mandalay Bay Hotel. So the subject of our podcast today, or the subjects we're going to dance around a lot, is the Route 91 concert shooting. So we call it, you guys call it the 10-1 event. Everybody has a different way of describing it, but pretty much everybody here in this area automatically goes back to saying 10-1. So I want to ask you all a little bit about that, and we'll work up to it. But I'd like to get a little bit more of y'all's background as we can. Brian, what brought you into first responder, I guess, into the world of being a first responder?
Sure. I moved to Las Vegas in 1999 after going to college to be a teacher. History major, coaching minor, was a baseball player in college. And when I first got here, I met a lot of people that were trying to get into the fire service and pushed me into taking some ENT classes. I had already taken some classes in injury prevention and first aid as part of the coaching minor. So I immediately worked my way through paramedic school by going through the EMT series, and the paramedic certification led into the fire service.
Which college did you play baseball at?
Eastern Oregon.
Sweet. What position?
Right field.
Right field.
Yeah.
So in Little League, typically the right fielder is the guy who, Jake's making
I
a
know.
couple motions
Thank you.
about it.
Thank you, Jake.
But at an upper level, the right fielder is typically the guy with the strongest arm.
Yes.
So how fast were you throwing that ball?
I threw out a couple people, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Travis, what about you? What made you come over here? Now, obviously, you said your family is in law enforcement.
Yes.
So what drew you out of your more lucrative field?
I have to say what finally was the decision-making change for me to change my whole life. As like I said, it was kind of my midlife crisis. I was approaching 40, and then 2 Metro officers were ambushed and murdered, Alan Beck and Igor Saldo, and I felt very personally upset about that. My brother was one of the officers responding on to that scene, and that was the motivation for me to decide I'm going to give this another shot. I'm going to become a police officer, and I haven't looked back since.
Excellent. What's been your biggest challenge getting into law enforcement, and I guess following through on the actual career field? What's been your biggest challenge?
I would say it was confidence at the time, because as a young man, like I said, I grew up in a law enforcement family, and as a young man in my early 20s, I tried out, and it was a time when it was pretty competitive, and I didn't make the cut. I was pretty devastated. Decided to go to college, got a accounting job, was a credit manager for a local construction company, and then spent the next 13 years staring at computer screens and looking at blueprints. And as I got to be 40 years old, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I'm not really getting any joy out of life. I needed something more, and this was definitely filled that niche.
Awesome. Well, good. I'm glad you did it. I think all of the first responders out there, all the guys in our field, are always happy when we're able to draw that out of somebody, and I think we all take great pride, and I think we're at a point in our industry or in our career field to where there's a lot of bad sentiment coming towards us. But those of us who are doing the job, I think we all still take great pride. So whenever we can pull somebody over to our side, we take a big prideful look at you. I don't know.
Most definitely.
Maybe not. All right, Jake.
Yes, sir.
Medical. Tell me about your favorite or most intense medical training in the Army.
We used to do live tissue labs, so we had the opportunity to kind of deal with pigs and goats.
Tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about it.
So they would take, pigs and goats, and we would deal with gunshot wounds or full abdominal eviscerations or amputations.
Abdominal eviscerations. Can you explain that one?
So sure, it's just essentially the innards of a human being, or in that case, a pig or a goat, being cut, and then you having the small or large intestine outside of the body, and then you're just dealing with that issue.
And so you guys were practicing how to actually save that animal and keep it alive throughout the process.
Correct. Typically under what they deem to be combat operations. So a lot of noise, a lot of smoke, typically from a prone position, just trying to simulate what those combat medics are dealing with and experiencing over in Iraq and Afghanistan during the portions of what it is that we were doing as far as our military operations.
Do you lean back on that type of training as you've gone along in your career, obviously in the Army, but now that you're in law enforcement, do you still lean back on that type of mindset training?
I lean back more on the stress inducement and just trying to manage your emotions. And our cadre down in San Antonio did such a fantastic job. They used to preach, if you can't control your voice, you can't control your hands. So try to not scream and try to slow yourself down and just deal with the problem at hand and kind of block out all the outside noise and the ancillary things that you're dealing with, and just try to focus on saving your patient or trying to deal with whatever medical adjunct or intervention you're trying to put forth.
Excellent. So, Dean, you said you're a MACTAC instructor.
Yes, sir.
So explain a little bit about what's going on with that. What does that mean?
First of all, you want me to try to follow that?
You know what?
That's where we're at.
I'm feeding you what I can.
All right, so MacTac instructor. So years ago, I don't know if you want me to start from the beginning, but we were asked by our department to try to start a program for a response to any incident outside the ordinary of what we have as a usual police response, if you will. And it kind of came after Mumbai. So
when you say Mumbai, you're talking about the incident in Mumbai, India?
India, yes, sir.
Multiple attackers in multiple locations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So what did y'all do to study that incident?
So some of our staff went over there, obviously got as much information as they could, came back to us and said, this is what happened over there. This is some of the information we got from it. We need to develop some kind of response to it to mitigate.
The guys that y'all sent over there, did they find a lot of good, I guess, partnership with the agencies in Mumbai?
So I don't know how to quite say this. They came back and said that the response for it, the overconvergence and things along that lines, was something that we needed to work on here to make sure. They compared that city to our city as far as the entertainment part of it, the amount of people that were there for that kind of thing. It relates to the city we have here in Las Vegas, and how we could get our officers to respond a little better than how they did there, as far as training and just getting them there. So we started to put together this program. We went and talked to Los Angeles city police, the county police, all those things. How do you guys do it? We took some from them. We took some from some other counties that we had talked to around here, and really took a hard look at how our valley was divided up. Other agencies here as well, like NHP, North Las Vegas, Henderson. How could we mitigate overconvergence in here in the valley? So when we looked at the response protocols, tried to put something in place with our area commands, the outside agencies, got that put together, then we started looking at the training and how we had to make the training the exact same throughout the valley. So when these outside agencies came into ours, we were all on the same page with it. You know, everybody knew the same thing, and that way we didn't have NHP showing up with their tactics and training, maybe melding in with our guys. If it wasn't the same, then we'd have, kind of a messed up response. They wouldn't work together well, and we didn't want that.
So the program you came up with, is this something that you guys invented, or is that something you adopted from a different agency?
It's a little bit of everything. I wouldn't say that we actually just came up with it. I mean, these are tactics that we've looked at from the military, from outside other agencies. We just kind of developed what we thought would work best in this valley. We hope that works for everybody else. We've tried to make it as simple as possible for any size agency,
right?
With outside agencies as well.
Cool, that's great. So what has been the biggest challenge, or what has been the biggest obstacle that shows you that there's flaws in your training, or have you found any flaws in your training? Have you seen any, obviously before the 10-1 incident, were y'all noticing any trends that were different, or were you pretty satisfied with what you had set up?
I think we always find flaws in our training. We're always trying to make it better. The biggest thing was getting everybody on the same page. Everybody had their little specialties and tactics, and everybody had their specialties in response, or how they thought response would be. And it's just trying to get everybody together. And then we talk about Rescue Task Force and how are we getting the fire department on board with it. And that was a whole other animal itself, just trying to get that under control, or even getting us to talk together.
Right. So I've had the good fortune of being able to travel around the country and train in different locales, and everybody seems to have a hard time getting all the agencies back on the same page. All the law enforcement agencies on the same page. So now that the trend seems to be interagency training with fire department, between fire and law enforcement, it seems to be a whole different obstacle to face. But we have a lot of agencies that are being very successful with it. The Las Vegas area has always held a great reputation for working well with all the agencies around here. So what was the biggest obstacle you all found, Brian, getting together with law enforcement?
Well, I'd say back to that previous question that Dean was talking about, as far as kind of gaps in training prior to 1 October was, we'd always kind of envisioned this response being kind of that man in the box that goes inside, shoots up a building, and then that's where all our patients are, and that's where the scene is. This one, we had something that we hadn't encountered before, was that elevated shooter, big open area, no real confinement of the scene or the patients or the casualties. So we're constantly having to look at ways to innovate and adapt to these changing circumstances and maybe things that we haven't even considered yet. But as far as challenges with integration, your previous question, I think we've done a really good job. I'm in this position now, and I've sort of followed in the steps of Mark Kittleson and Evan Hanna, guys that I think that have done a lot of the groundwork in
Pretty
this
much
field.
legendary in the area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're just continuing those relationships that have already been built. And my fire chief and fire administration has been really supportive of maintaining this position and making sure that we continue that momentum. So they're fully committed to having a person to ensure that the relationships continue.
Yeah, I think that kind of speaks well across all jobs. If somebody leaves you a good footsteps to follow in, that always helps out. And those guys did a great job for y'all. So, what has been the biggest change in training now that you all have integration training in place? What about you? How did you get included in all this? You're coming from the state.
Coming from the state, we had a lieutenant from us now that works for parole and probation. Previously, he was with the Highway Patrol. He was very fortunate enough to make some really good positive friendships and relationships with Dean, Bert, and Bobby, the three stakeholders from Metro MacTac, close to a decade ago, and then started to push forward with training for the Highway Patrol to be standardized. Because like Dean talked about, we didn't want to show up on scene and us zigging and them zagging, so to make sure that we were all on the same page. And then he kind of took me under his wing and was like, hey, come here, kid, I'm going to bring you out here to some of the MacTac training, and took to it like a duck to water and started to come out and get involved and try and help out as much as I could. Like I mentioned to these guys before, I'll take the trash out or whatever you needed to, right? Just to kind of get my foot in the door and kind of see how the training was and start to integrate as much as we could. And from there, I took over the lead instructor role and then got permanently attached to the task force 18 months ago. So it's just been one thing after another. And I think you're going to hear a reoccurring theme. I think it's built more on relationships with individuals than it is with agencies. We'll talk about it when we talk about 10-1, but like the partnerships that are built and how it is that we're able to work so well together within this valley isn't because of the patches or what agency it is we work for. It's just based on personal relationships with the people who make those decisions. So it's extremely important to kind of have that foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think the strong will or desire to train, get better, make yourselves better, make the people around you better. I think that seems to be the bond that we all have together in our groups. So you all obviously exhibit that, Jake. I've known you for a little while, so I know that you have that. You've been one of our instructors for a little while. How long have you been an adjunct for Alert?
I believe over 2 years.
Okay,
over
cool.
2 years.
You learned a lot there, or you think that you've learned more since you've been a part of us?
Oh my God! So the wealth of knowledge that you have in your adjunct base is it's unbelievable, right? You have everybody from every different background, whether it be from special forces to large metropolitan police agencies to large metropolitan fire agencies to smaller agencies, and just what it is that we can learn from one another, whether it comes to our method of instruction or what you can gain as far as information from how people do things in a rural setting. Like Dean, how did you do things in Iowa? And Cap, how do you do things here in Las Vegas? It's unbelievable to have that opportunity to bounce ideas off one another and then to learn from one another, and that camaraderie, being able to go out and fly to a remote location and be able to provide a level of service and education to folks that may not otherwise have the opportunity. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, I'll kind of start segueing into the 10-1 incident and ask you a few questions as we go. If I hit on the subject that maybe you don't want to talk about, I don't mind. Just let me know. We'll figure a way around it. But Travis, tell me about what was your assignment? What was your job at that point during the 10-1 incident, and more or less what was going on for you that morning or that day?
That's what's so chilling about it is I remember clearly my mindset. It was just another Sunday night. I was on the department only 2 years. I was one of the newer guys working graveyard. Came on Sunday night. We were at briefing when everything went down. You start to get a suspicion that there's something going on. You had sergeants' phones going off left and right, people leaving the briefing room, coming back, and next thing you know, it comes out over the air. We have an active shooter at Mandalay Bay. Everyone's running out of the briefing room. Our location is just a couple miles away, so we were all very close. And that was, as I'm in my patrol car, and I'm en route, rolling code to the scene. And that's when I first started to really realize the size of the event we're dealing with and the absolute chaos of it. When I get down, I was going down Sunset to Las Vegas Boulevard, and all of a sudden there's cars going every direction. And at one point I encountered a pickup truck flagging me down, where the lady frantically waving me down, telling me she had multiple gunshot fatalities victims in the bed of her pickup truck. And I looking into the bed, and I'm just seeing bodies stacked on bodies. And then it became to be very real to me that this is something more than, I guess, what you, as a law enforcement officer, when you hear active shooter, like the fire captain was saying, you're expecting somebody, in a facility, one gunman shooting people. And then when I saw just the size and scope of it, I realized that this is something that none of us could have possibly anticipated or even
It's hard to
thought
plan
of.
for something that big. So, Travis, you said you were coming out of briefing at that point. Give me an idea of how far you had to drive from where you were getting briefed to the incident.
I'm literally 2 miles away.
Wow. So that is right around the corner.
Yeah, we were just down the street.
So that truck that you just mentioned, that's one that I think we all heard about. We've heard stories about the Route 91 shooting and people actually jumping into action and doing what they had to do. I think the story behind that truck was something that somebody actually figured out how to get the truck started and commandeered the vehicle. Is that the same truck we're talking about?
It is not the same truck, but
Oh, okay.
it was one of many stories of heroism of just everyday people stepping above and beyond and saving their fellow man.
Wow.
It happened to be just a local family who was out at the venue, and they encountered a family in town from California whose daughter, a young lady in her early 20s, was struck and had severe arterial and nerve damage and was literally bleeding to death. They flagged this local family down, said they don't have no transportation, they don't know where to go, and if they don't help them, their daughter's going to die. Loaded this whole family in their truck, took off, flying down Las Vegas Boulevard, where they almost ran into me. And being a state trooper, when I first encounter them, I'm on my way to a major incident, adrenaline's up, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I got a drunk here. And it turns out, it was much more serious than that.
So what did you do with those guys?
I made the decision to immediately escort them to the Valley's only level 1 trauma center that I knew of. So I got them, told them to stay on my tail. I'm going to get them to UMC Trauma. I'm going to get them to help, knowing that their daughter was in a really bad shape. And that's where it became very evident to me we talked about it earlier off camera, of course, but how the smallest jobs in an event like this, where you get these guys who were upset that they didn't get to be one of the assaulters, that you have a state trooper and he's just sitting on a ramp thinking, major incident, he wants to get in, he wants to end the killing, he wants to save lives, and here he is sitting on a ramp. But I'm here to say that those are the jobs that saved hundreds of lives that night. We had a lieutenant make a decision to shut down the I-15 to all regular traffic, completely drain it off for emergency traffic only.
And the I-15, could you explain how that runs?
That is pretty much one of the busiest highways, at least on the western United States. It is the major thoroughfare from Los Angeles to Las Vegas.
Gotcha.
It is the highway that runs right along Las Vegas Boulevard. It is a major highway. And Highway Patrol, we had it shut down approximately 11 minutes, covering the entire expanse of Las Vegas Boulevard, the whole strip corridor. And I experienced firsthand the difference between, even in an emergency vehicle, fighting my way through panic congestion, literally forcing my way, splitting lanes and forcing people out of my way, trying to get this truck through this chaos, to the point where we had it closed down and it was 6 lanes of open, empty travel lanes.
Yeah, and
with
so that's
nothing but
a
me
great
and,
description.
ambulances, and that was it. And I mean, it cut critical minutes off of this. I think it's what in the end saved this young girl's life.
I love the emotional description you're giving, Travis. So that's one of the things that we don't talk about, and we don't go into great detail, or maybe I guess maybe I'm saying it to the right person, being that you're PIO now, but one of the things that we don't push out there enough is why we're actually doing those things. In a big incident, we shut down roads and we clear them to all traffic except for first responder traffic going out there. And that's really the reason we're doing it. And like you're saying, those are life-saving measures that people just don't understand. So it's good that you're pushing it out there. I appreciate that. Brian, how about you, man? What was your duty that day?
Sure. I don't want to misrepresent my role in it. I tried to get a couple people that had some really instrumental roles in the response, and it's still hard for them to talk about it, and so they were a little bit reluctant. I was actually working at a station 66 out in Mountain's Edge. It's probably 10 miles off the strip. My wife called me that night, said, "Hey, there's something going on at Mandalay Bay," and pulled up the Visinet, went out, got on my radio, and heard the traffic and saw all the units assigned to it already. We had probably 40% of the valley's resources were already there or en route to it. My firefighters come running in to the office. "Hey, let's go. We got to get down there." And I'm like, we're like the only engine left in like 20 square miles. I don't know that we would do any more good. But if something else happens in this area, there's no one here at all to respond to anything. And so pretty soon thereafter, we started picking up calls for service just in other stations areas and just kind of manning the Southwest Valley. And so we ran a couple calls, treated people where we could. There weren't any available ambulances for transport, and we're on an engine, so we treated people as best we can and tried to just manage their expectations of, we need to fix this problem here with you tonight because you're probably not going to make it to the hospital. And if you do, it's going to be backed up by the time you get there. So we treated people as well as we could, listened to the call until about 4 o'clock in the morning. So spent about 5 hours just kind of monitoring the radio and just bouncing from call to call.
So you said that we treated people where we could, as good as we could. Tell me about what y'all were doing to them, or what kind of injuries you were encountering, and what kind of treatments you were giving them.
This was just this wasn't related to the shootings. These were just medical complaints and people at home and their diabetic problems. We were giving sugar and
You were still on
breathing
standard
treatments.
response.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
cool. And after I guess time downtown or time in the middle of the incident, did your engine get deployed over to the actual incident?
No, we did not.
Okay, cool. So you had to stay out, basically handling the rest of the city.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay,
Yes.
cool. Jake, where were you at that night?
So at the time, I was swing shift traffic ops. So Travis had mentioned typically we do a changeover at 2200 hours. So like we kind of go into the office and then Graves will come on at 2200, and then we have that 2-hour overlap where swings will go off duty at midnight. So for us, from a manpower perspective, as far as the event when it took place, it couldn't have happened, at a more conducive time for the amount of manpower we had, because we had all of swing shift that was on, and then all of graveyard was coming on. So I was at the office just like Travis was, less than 2 miles away. Calls started going out. Another trooper came running into the briefing room, was like, "Hey, you hear what's going on?" And I'm like, "No, what's going on?" And he kind of let me in. So then, with the proximity of where we were and kind of the staff that we had on duty that night, and just based on training with these guys, I knew that there needed to be some type of representation in incident command. So you've got enough gun toters in this valley. Las Vegas Metro is a massive law enforcement entity, and with all the other partnering agencies, as far as gunfighters going in there, we have enough. As far as people that are going to be represented in incident command to kind of make the decisions to kind of make this event hopefully as successful as we could from a response characteristic. That's kind of where I got lucky and went down to South Central Area Command. I kind of took a guess as far as where IC would be set up, and then deployed from NHP Southern Command and went down to South Central, and then got in there, and there was only a handful of folks, and we started to devise a plan of kind of what we needed and what was happening, and like the amount of calls that were coming in, and still trying to garner information in those first 15, 20 minutes.
So when you checked in, did you check in with a command center, or was there an incident command center set up yet?
No. So it was on the fly. So you had a couple of representatives from Metro that were down there that were starting to put the pieces together, just based on proximity between, where we're at now at Mandalay Bay to South Central Area Command, it's a stone's throw away. Large front parking area that we utilize for staging, large rear parking area to be able to facilitate, the parking of all the first responder vehicles there. And as far as the proximity to the event, it was a pretty good location for IC. Went in there, and Travis had mentioned it earlier, just trying to set up the closure of the freeways and, ingress and egress. And I know that FEMA kind of dinged us on it as far as shutting down the freeways. Our response and what we were thinking about wasn't non-uniform personnel or doctors or nurses, but it was lights and sirens and getting people out of there as quickly as we could.
Did you all know where the shooter was at that time?
There were so many conflicting calls. We had the reports, obviously, it was from an elevated position, but the amount of echo calls that we were receiving was unbearable. I mean, several hundred echo calls in the first hour.
Can you explain echo calls? It's kind of a unique situation down here on the Strip.
Sure. So you have, over 20,000 people within the venue, shots fired, those people disperse. They start to call 911 from the location where they're at. So say, for example, they were receiving shots fired within the venue, but then they go ahead and make it over to the Tropicana Hotel. They go ahead and call 911. Hey, listen, there's shots fired. Well, where are you? I'm at the Tropicana Hotel. So now the information gets put out. We have shots fired at the Tropicana Hotel. And that just continued to happen over and over and over again for, several hours after the event. So it was very troublesome because we were deploying resources to go in there to deal with shooters that weren't actually there.
Right.
But it was based on information that we were receiving real time from people that were within the venue that were just trying to find a safe place to hide.
All right. So you were fixing to go out on your regular patrol shift and ended up sucked into the whole incident.
Yeah. And
Dean, how about you?
Yes, sir. Well, it started off kind of slow, actually, to keep it G-rated. Wife and I were just getting ready to go to bed. We were going to watch a TV show, and we were just laying down, and my
What
head
were you
barely-
watching?
I wish I could tell you. I don't even remember. Some crazy show.
Golden Girls?
Probably Golden Girls, some house hunting show that she likes to watch because, I don't get to control that when we're there. So my head hadn't even hit the pillow. I was laying there, and the phone started going off. So a friend of mine who had actually was working overtime at one of the hospitals said, "Hey, are you listening to the radio?" No, actually, I'm laying here, but I'm like, yeah, okay. So I kick it on and start hearing the chaos that was going on. No sooner did that happen than my partners, Bobby Chamberlain and Bert Hughes, and our sergeant at the time, Brandon Clarkson, we started a text chain. Hey, what's going on? This is happening. All right. Our sergeant at the time was like, hey, I'm heading to the IC. Do your thing. I do want to give a shout out to my wife and the other dispatchers because I really don't think that they get the credit that they deserve for what they do. As soon as I jumped up out of bed, and this was a minute after these texts started, I started throwing on clothes, and she went right into this dispatch mode. She grabbed my radio, and she's writing down notes, and she's listening to everything. So the minute it took me to throw my clothes on and get ready to go out the door, she had actually handed me my radio and a sheet of paper that had information on it of everything that was going on, suspect description as best they had it at that time, where it was supposed to be from, and all this stuff. I mean, it was right there for me as I ran out the door. So as we were heading in,
So real quick, is she a dispatch with the same agency?
she is a dispatcher with Metro Police. Yeah,
Sweet. How long has she been there?
she's been there. Let's see, I've been on 21 years. She's been on there about 20 years.
Wow, that's great.
So she went right into that mode.
So you hit the road.
Yep, hit the road, heading in. Of course, texts are still going on and off, and like Smack has said, by the time I started hitting the 15, it was dead. There was nothing on the road, and that's the first thing I thought was, holy crap, I bet NHP shut everything down so these ambulances could get through. And I saw a few as we were going by. We all knew that we were kind of behind the power curve as far as to get on those assault teams, but we all knew that, hey, we needed to get where FD was going to be because we knew that that was going to be the next wave coming. And we knew that we were kind of on the forefront of that because we were the ones that had trained the most on it. So we wanted to be there. We wanted to be part of that team. We grabbed our gear, and we drove straight to Trop on the Boulevard, is where we were at. We knew that's where the CP, if you will, for Rescue Task Force or medical is going to be set up. As we come flying into there and pulling up, of course, obeying all policies and procedures.
Absolutely. So before we go there, so you said you all knew that's where the incident command or the
We were hearing
CCTV
that's where it was being set up. The
Oh, okay,
medical
so they
was
were
being
already
set
putting
up.
that information out. Okay, cool.
We were hearing that on the radio. So we come up to that location, and we jump out of the car, the truck that we have. And as soon as we got out, we saw Chief Castle standing there. It was the first guy that we saw. And he literally said, as soon as we got out, he goes, "Oh, thank God you guys are here." And I don't think that was a, "Thank God you guys are here, you're going to save the day" kind of thing. It was a comment of familiarity. He saw us. He knew who we were. We knew who he was. And he was like, "All right, now we're ready to go." And he told us right off the bat, "I've got guys ready for you. because he knew why we were there. We knew we could get rescue task force out. We could do something right now.
So Chief Castle, who is he?
He was the fire chief for Clark County Fire.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so
He has since retired, living the good life, I'm sure.
awesome.
He's doing a
He's
poor job
managing-
at retirement.
Yeah, he's
He's doing a
currently
poor job.
managing Corona vaccine response in Southern Nevada.
Oh, okay, great. So you got there, and the fire guy was actually happy to see you.
Yep.
Cool.
They were ready to go for us. Had an ambulance waiting for us, believe it or not, sitting right there. So we got out. Well, we had talked about a little bit before about some of the protocols that we had put in place for this rescue task force, having to have a captain there and all this stuff, some of the protocols in place to how we set it up and how we go. Well, we had run out of fire captains. They were busy doing a lot of stuff, but we had a firefighter sitting right there for us. He was ready to go with us. So I linked up with him, and we were talking about how the route we were going to go. This is what we're going to do. We're going to drive down Las Vegas Boulevard and into Mandalay Bay and do our thing. And over the years of this training, we had heard from several officers that, man, are you sure the firemen are really going to do this with us? Are they going to go into that warm zone and blah, blah, blah? I'm here to tell you there was literally no hesitation. The only question I got from this firefighter that was leading their team was, hey, is there any way you could put someone up front of the ambulance with us with a rifle in case we take fire? And I said, absolutely. Bobby Chamberlain over here, my little angry Marine, I said, yeah. I said, Bob, can you get up front? Bob goes, absolutely. He crawled up in the front of that ambulance and led us right down Las Vegas Boulevard and right into the parking, the front parking here of Mandalay Bay. And that's
Was
where
that
we
something
got
y'all
out.
had practiced before, or something y'all threw together?
We threw together right then. I mean, we knew what the gist was of Rescue Task Force and how we were going to do it, but for getting from Trop on the Boulevard into the Porte Cochet, it's a fancy word I learned. It's what it's called.
French.
Right?
Nice.
There with the ambulance, that was just, we threw it together right then. Let's go. He sat up front with them, watching that front. We put everyone else in there, and I sat on the back of the ambulance, and we drove down there and right up into it. We got out and made a little perimeter for us, and then we pushed inside Mandalay Bay to clear that first floor, that casino level.
Awesome. So about how long into the incident was this?
It was a while before we got the clearance to go in. I'd probably say, about a half hour, 40 minutes by the time it really got rolling for us to get in there. There was a little
Probably 'cause we had
confusion.
cleared the Tropicana
Yeah.
as well from some of the echo calls.
Yeah.
So you were still inside the first hour.
Yeah.
Okay,
Before we
okay.
started rolling, like Jake said, there was a lot of echo calls, and when we first got there and we were getting set up, we got a call that was someone was inside the Tropicana shooting. Right, that's how the call came out. So
Right.
we ran into the Tropicana, and as we ran in there, everyone was just kind of walking around. We're like, I don't think this is what it's coming out to be, because everyone was pretty calm. So as we were walking back out, another one said, no, they're inside here shooting again. So we walked back inside, and we're like, no, this ain't it. So we actually had, I think he was a Capitol Police officer. He was there with us, had run in with us. I asked him, I said, hey, look, is there any way you could get to security, to surveillance, and sit inside surveillance, and if you see something, be the one to call? Because there's, we're going to
Right.
get these echo calls, and I want someone in there that's actually going to physically be able to see this on camera and actually make some good decisions, whether it is or not.
Totally makes sense. Having a one line of communication. That's great.
Yeah, that was Billy West.
Is that who that was?
Yeah, Billy West was the one that was with you guys that ended up going into the surveillance room. Yeah.
You guys staying in touch with Billy West?
I stay in touch with him. Yeah, Travis and I do. He works with us.
Awesome. Great.
So yeah, he's a good dude.
Sweet.
Yeah, I was thinking of those echo calls too from after I cleared the ambulance and I was stationed on Las Vegas Boulevard just south of the Welcome to Las Vegas sign, kind of in the shadow of Mandalay Bay. Listening on the radio, I'd say that was one of the greatest challenges of that night were those echo calls and the confusion. I didn't realize we had one shooter until I was hot washed at 8 a.m. the next morning. I was standing on Las Vegas Boulevard all night, for lack of a better term, puckered, staring at these crowds of people coming down Las Vegas Boulevard and coming out of the alleyways of the shopping centers around me, where they're just visitors looking for somewhere to go because they can't get back to their rooms because of the chaos going on. And listening to these calls, first thought I had being a MacTac instructor was Mumbai. I'm like, this is a Mumbai playing out right on Las Vegas Boulevard, and I'm scanning everybody passing by me, looking for rifles, looking for anything that I can perceive as a threat, and then come to find out next morning we had one elevated shooter, and that didn't get out to a lot of us on the ground, like I said, until the hot wash.
Excellent. So, Kit, let's talk about Kit. So, I know a lot of us who know you, Jake, know there's a picture out there of you standing on the actual boulevard out there. But let's talk about the kit that you guys were deploying with. You were a couple of years into your job, right? So, what was it that you deployed with that day, Travis? What actual gear? When we say kit, we talk about the gear that you wear or carry with you. What did you have with you out there? Were you a long rifle guy?
Yes, that is one of the great things about the Department of Public Safety is they issue all state troopers a patrol rifle with a red dot optic. So I did have my rifle, and then I had spent my own funds at the time on some rifle plates, and then I was issued a ballistic helmet. The department has since then issued, I believe, every state trooper some ballistic plates as a response to that event, but I was one of the few lucky ones where at the time I did have my own.
Excellent. Jake?
So, like we preach all the time, like, hey, stay prepared, bring what you're going to bring to the fight, right? So when I had initially arrived at South Central Area Command, I had top of the line plate carrier, top of the line Team Wendy helmet, my rifle, everything ready to go, get into incident command, and then worked that aspect as far as IC, and then went right out to staging. And then when I went out to staging right away to get deployed into one of the assault teams, left my plate carrier and my helmet in incident command and had to go retrieve it the next morning. But I brought it, but then didn't bring it, right? So in the heat of the moment, trying to get back out there and get deployed, I had left everything in there along with my med bag. I had a smaller med bag that I still had on my person, and then went out and basically it was just me and my rifle and the guys from Bolton Area Command that I got attached to. So
Those are that's probably the worst feeling. You show up somewhere and you don't have the gear, or you just had it and I don't know where I put it.
Yep.
I know that's probably got to be the worst feeling. Tell me about it.
it wasn't fun. Like it's, you had everything pre-staged, and I think all of us are, consider ourselves consummate professionals and have things ready to go in our car, and at a moment's notice, you never know when things are going to pop off, and you go there and trying to garner as much information from an incident commander's perspective to try to push out information to your troops, and then have all your stuff, and then all of a sudden your role changes in an instant. Like you're no longer in charge of the event as far as an IC component. You're now a member of an assault team, and then not have the tools that you would normally have if you would have just deployed to staging and then just went out as that assault element. It was just more, I don't know, embarrassing, I guess you could say. Like, hey man, why am I out here without my plates? Like, what am I doing out here? Like, what's going on? Like, I should have these things. And
Rookie move.
yeah, like you have it, but then like, you know what I'm saying? In the heat of the moment, you just left it inside. So now
Happens to all of us, man. So you said something about possibly ending up as a member of an assault team. Did you end up getting thrown on one of the assault teams?
I did. So we had over 50 assault teams that were deployed that night. For me, like I said before, the first, I guess, infancy of that event was in IC, and then the lieutenant that Travis had mentioned, Lieutenant Eric Kemmer, he came in, we phoned and woke him, and then he came in and relieved me in incident command. He took over command for the state, because obviously we're there to support Metro and to support fire and to have those heads of those agencies kind of working together to kind of fight this problem. So when he came in, I went out to staging, and then I was deployed into the 13th Assault Team with some members from Bolton Area Command.
So when you say assault team, what were y'all hitting? What kind of targets were y'all hitting?
We were dealing with the majority of the echo calls in the Tropicana block of Las Vegas Boulevard. So,
Okay.
and they were coming out everywhere from Bellagio to New York to the Tropicana again, up and down the Strip corridor, Hooters, Reno and Giles down by the church. So it was just one after another after another.
So
And
in that, like in those deployments or in those calls, did you find yourselves having to breach any structures, or were you just showing up to the actual facilities?
So we were showing up to the majority of the facilities, and then for us, it was primarily entry level, so first floor of the hotel/casinos. So we'd go in and, clearing banks of slot machines is not something that a lot of us had ever trained before. But a threshold is a threshold, right? Whether it's a doorway or a bank of slot machines, you're just going to try and work that problem. So that's kind of what we were doing. And then, like Dean said, we'd respond to the Bellagio, hey, shots fired. We'd go in there. There'd be people, running or jogging or whatever, but no active stimulus, no shots. And it would be like a stanchion got knocked over or someone dropped a glass or something like that, and just trying to put the pieces back together. And that happened for a while. And then I don't know if it was a captain or a DC for Metro. Finally, was like, hey, listen, like we're not going to be responding to these until we have confirmed shots fired, and did a really good job of trying to kind of mitigate that and kind of sending us like, a cat chasing its tail. So
Yeah, that's a varsity move right there, because that's a tough call for a commander to make. But yeah, you have to make that call at some point. So did y'all notice as y'all were going up and down the strip responding to these ghost calls or echo calls, did you guys notice that the rest of the strip was just functioning like it was? Did it know what was happening, or does everybody seem to be aware of what was happening down at the Mandalay?
Oh no, everyone was aware, because the amount of people that were within that venue that dispersed, like that's all you were dealing with. So it's not like you had an influx of just normal bystanders that were there that weren't aware of what was happening. And then the amount of gunfire that came from that position in that short amount of time, like everyone knew what was going on. And then to see you can't walk past, Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard, where Dean was the main casualty collection point that we had. So you're literally stepping over dead bodies in the intersection of Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard. And to kind of put it in perspective, there's more hotel rooms in that one block than there is in all of San Diego proper. So it's a massive intersection that's extremely busy, and you're literally stepping over people that were just, unfortunately shot, 30 minutes ago. Everyone knew what was going on.
So I guess just to kind of explain for people that are watching or listening, when we say casualty collection point, that's kind of a place where you kind of call it an ad hoc collection of injured people or injuries that we've found on the street, injuries that we found from the incident, and kind of bring them all to a certain place to where medical professionals can actually treat them. So when we say casualty collection point, that's what we're talking about. Did you guys all know each other before the incident?
I knew Dean, Bert, and Bobby prior to
Yeah.
the incident, just based on training.
Based on the training part?
I knew Greg Castle, Mark Kittleson, obviously Brandon Clarkson mentioned it before. But individually, I had worked with Travis.
Right.
Had an opportunity to meet Cap yet. But, Dean mentioned it. When I was in incident command, I wasn't looking for another cop. I was looking for Brandon Clarkson.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for another firefighter. I was looking for Mark Kittleson.
So, and the familiar face thing, the warm and fuzzy is always I guess something we talk about, but I think it brings it back to the fact that that group is who you trained with. And I think that that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in our program is we talk about spreading and kind of standardizing the training to make sure everybody has the same amount of training so we can be comfortable with grabbing the first guy that we saw. We know that, we're comfortable with knowing that we trained them the right way. But I think that's one of the things that makes it so comfortable for us to find somebody that we knew. So you talked about setting up RTFs and going right after it. So is RTF training something that y'all had been doing prior to that?
So we had been doing that training for a while. We had called it force protection because we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We were just trying to get this together. We had done
So
a lot of
I'm
it
sorry,
with-
Dean. Let me, I guess, and since the podcast is opened up to everybody and we're trying to spread this out to the general public, RTF being a rescue task force, and a rescue task force is one of those. It's basically a group of people. We're taking medics in with protection from law enforcement professionals. So when we say a rescue task force, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So go ahead from there. Sorry.
Yeah.
I try to not to interrupt you too often.
No, that's fine. Yes, we had been training it for a while. We had started roughly in about 2011, 2012 to try to get these two agencies or disciplines together to do that training. I don't know how much to go on that. A lot of our training was at first was just trying to get the two disciplines to agree on how we were going to do it, and then getting actual firemen to train with actual police officers and getting them working together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like that's been one of the things that we've seen. I know when we did it in my home agency, and we've seen it across the country, we'll ask everybody, it's like, you've been a cop for 20 years or you've been a firefighter for 30 years. How many times have you all actually trained together? And everybody responds the same. It's like, we never train together. But yet all the incidents will have our incident command set up, and we're fire and police set up all in the same place every single time. So it's kind of it's cool way to break the mold. And so we need to start training together more often. On the RTF training, did you get to be a part of that, Brian?
Yeah, I was in some of those original classes back in 2012. So when you said, do we know these guys? I remember Dean, and when I bit into this unit last year, I was like, oh man, I get to work with these guys now. They gave me that first class I took, almost 10 years ago or whatever. So Dean, Bert, and Bobby, I knew those guys, as kind of these legendary figures here in the Valley. And when he talks about Chief Castle, back then originally he was the battalion chief of training, so they got to know him. And at the time, he was C1 of our department. So, the fire chief of a 600 or 800 person agency knowing first name a police officer of 4,000 plus or whatever department. That's pretty amazing that those two levels, rank levels, I guess, would know each other actually.
Yeah, it really
Us
is.
being way down at the very bottom.
Yeah, it's amazing. But absolutely, we did that original training back in 2012 or so, and then we've kind of just tried to maintain as well as we could. Obviously, it's hard to maintain that momentum, and we're always fighting either attrition of losing the guys that know all of these processes, or hiring new people that haven't had the training yet. So it's this constant refocusing.
I think the biggest thing too wasn't just the getting out and doing the RTF training right away. It was what we call like a PD 101 and an FD 101. We have trained at each other's academies on just the basic. I've gone to their fire academies and did a presentation where it's very basic as far as you guys are out there on a traffic accident and you see a police car drive by. It's not us flipping you the bird and just driving by saying, haha, we're not going to stop on this. We actually have a traffic section that comes out and handles those accidents. So it's not us, just sloughing you off. There's a reason why. And bringing it down to a personal level for them so they start understanding why we do what we do. And vice versa. They come out and say, this is why we do things a certain way on our calls. So now the cops we're kind of personalizing each other's disciplines. And we explain to them, when you're on even the smallest call, go up and talk to that captain. If you're a sergeant, go up and talk to that captain. There could be a reason why they're doing it a certain way. And usually it comes down to communication. Barricade calls. We used to get a lot of complaints. Well, FD leaves. We'll explain to them. We're on a barricade call for a reason. Reason we want a rescue to stand by is there's a potential for someone to get shot.
Can you explain the barricade call?
Well, just where a suspect may have had someone hostage, or maybe it's holding themselves hostage and they might shoot out a window or step out and shoot at one of the officers and has the potential for somebody to get injured, obviously, gunshot. So we want a rescue standing by just for that incident. FD sometimes they'll be sitting there for a while and, well, it's kind of a wasted resource. They're sitting there, they have no reason why. Of course, they want to get back to work. Well, officers get frustrated with that, and sometimes the supervisors get frustrated with why are they leaving? Well, this is why. They're not getting any information. When simply on that call, you can build that relationship by going up and telling them, hey, right away, this is why we want you to stand around. Okay, I get it. Then we'll go ahead and put this ambulance over here and we'll wait. Well, that's where you start fostering it. And then when we start teaching and training the rescue task force part of it, it starts fostering more of that relationship, and they start understanding why we do what we do. The biggest one was teaching our guys not to chase after the suspect. When you're assigned to that rescue task force element, that is your job for the day. No, it's not sexy. It's not the assault team. You're not going to be the one chasing and going and getting the bad guy. You have to have the discipline to stay with that RTF element. And the fire department has to trust the fact that you're going to stay with them. Right?
Yeah, you create that bond, and you have to kind of stick by the mission. And it's probably hard for cops in general to think, man, we're not going to go chase after that bang that was out there. So let me take you back to the actual night of the incident. Y'all, you threw Bobby in the front seat.
Oh, yeah.
And y'all were getting after it. So tell me about your rescue task force. How many people was there, and who was it? Or how many how many cops?
Well, there were 4 firefighters. We had the 4 firefighters on that team with us. We ended up with Bert, Bobby, myself. We ended up picking up one of our guys from our armor section who hadn't been assigned to anything. He just happened to be right there, so we grabbed him up and put him in there with us. We were the initial team that drove down there. When we got inside of Mandalay Bay, somehow, and I'm not quite sure how this ended up, but we ended up picking up a sergeant. And I can't remember what area command he was from. He just kind of showed up, and he was there with us. And that was basically our team.
So you saw him, just grabbed him, and says, hey, we need you.
He just happened to be there and just, hey, what are you guys doing? We're RTF-1. We're going to start clearing this floor. Okay. And then he was just with us. We're like, okay, cool.
Awesome.
So we pulled him up.
Cool. Did you find a lot of victims inside the Mandalay?
Not inside Mandalay Bay. We were wondering if we were going to, but it seemed like everything was out on that field.
Okay, great. Did you all ever make it? Did your RTF ever make it onto the actual concert grounds?
We did, not as that RTF1. We had ended up clearing all of the casino level floor. While we were there, there was some more confusion on the radio. It was quite a hectic night. After about an hour and a half of us being inside there, maybe 2 hours, being on that casino floor, clearing it, a couple of the theaters, there was a call coming from the field of the officers that were out there that needed to be relieved off of there for a couple various reasons.
Sure.
So our sergeant was in the IC himself, and he had taken a couple phone calls from that field, the people that were in charge out on that field, and he actually called us on the phone and said, "Hey, look, I need you guys to go out and relieve them off that field. Can you do it for us?" So we said, "Yeah, absolutely, Sarge. What do you need us to do?" And he told us where to go. So we went out there and relieved some of the officers off that field, and then we ended up staying about 8 hours, over the bodies.
So I guess that was going to be my next question. Is that at that point we had already cleared out all of the people who were left uninjured, and there were still bodies still laying all over the field.
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's a tough sight. That's a tough sight to deal with. I mean, most people don't. I guess people don't think about that being one of the sites that we deal with in American law enforcement. You hear about stories like that coming from overseas, from the war, but there's very few stories that we hear about where an incident like this actually occurs and you're standing over bodies for an extended period of time. Travis, you were talking about that truck that you ended up stopping. You were talking to them, and you said that there was blood. You could see the bloody people in the back of that truck.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Tell me about what happened there. What was your feelings going on into that?
That was the first time where it was something I was completely not expecting. Kind of threw me off my OODA loop a little bit. But immediately I reacted and knew I had to do something for them. And it turns out, the majority of the blood was coming from the young lady with arterial bleed, where her father had done what he can with a makeshift tourniquet made out of his belt, but it wasn't getting the job done.
What kind of medical training had you had before that?
I've had basic, first aid CPR through the department.
Right.
My medical training is pretty minimal as far as that goes. I can apply tourniquets, I provide CPR, and very, very basic things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I figured the best thing I can do is utilize my emergency lights and get them where they needed to be, where someone who better trained than myself will be much more assistance to them. But I'd also like to talk about what we were just kind of discussing, like with the concert grounds.
Yeah.
I had an encounter of one of the deceased that I found something that most people would never consider. But we had one of the deceased, Denise Berditis, who I encountered that night. She had been shot in the head, and she was literally spent the night wrapped in a sheet with her husband clutching onto her in the back of another pickup truck. And these poor people, the pickup truck wasn't related to them, but her husband had her with him. They put him in the back of the truck, and they're trying to find help for her. They actually stopped out with a paramedic ambulance, and they couldn't do anything with Denise because, other than tag her, she was deceased. And they had to save their bus for the people who they could help. And so this poor pickup truck is literally driving around Las Vegas with the remains of one of the victims, trying to find somewhere to put her. And they ended up on my scene. And it was another example, too, of law enforcement coming together, which blew my mind. Was they were led to my scene by a sergeant with the Arizona Highway Patrol, who just happened to be in town for a convention or something. And he encountered him on the I-15 and then saw my lights and brought him to me. And he did a great solid, because I had to stay on my post. And he actually led them to another closer local hospital. So, that Denise can be taken out of this truck and
Sure.
Treated with a little more respect than driving around the back of a pickup truck with her. And that was one of the moments, though, as a police officer, that I felt the most helpless. Is that's one of those things where I'm staring at this poor man clutching onto his wife, and he's looking up at me, and I'm dumbfounded. I don't know what to say to him. What am I going to tell him?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people don't talk about, or maybe the conversations are just starting to open up to talk about that. There's a lot of incidents in our career path where we end up, I guess, with that feeling of helplessness because we're just unable to help. Sometimes it's because of the whole size of the incident we're dealing with. Sometimes it's because of the training that we have or have not done. But there's a lot of those incidents that come into play. Jake, at one point you and me were talking offline, and we were talking about what you saw or what was going on in the actual hospitals. Did you ever make it over to the hospitals afterwards? I know you got to talk to a lot of people in the hospitals from afterwards. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Just that night, didn't make it over to the hospital. I made it over to UMC the following day.
Right.
Also made it over to Sunrise the following day, and just through conversations with the folks that were over there that were trying to help triage outside, and then obviously the nurses and the amazing medical professionals we have here in town that were doing that work. Like there was, literally, blood up to some of their ankles. Like there was just so much blood that was coming in from all the gunshot wounds and the gunshot victims that were arriving there, and people trying to do the best that they could. And with the concert and how it took place, with the amount of off-duty first responders and off-duty military personnel trying to utilize improvised tourniquets and some type of bleeding control as best they could, there were still too many holes to try and plug, and there wasn't enough belts and improvised tourniquets for them to utilize prior to them being transported. So now you have all of these people being transported primarily in non-traditional means, showing up to these hospitals with it not having the available resources to treat, and then you have all of that blood just being spilled on the floor right there in the entryways and the initial entry ports of UMC and our medical treatment facilities here in town. So it's pretty crazy to think about, like, that many victims, over 400 gunshot victims in that short amount of time being transported unaccounted for the majority of them. Because as Travis mentioned, they're just getting into any vehicle they can, Uber, pickup truck. We had LE personnel that were transported. We had fire personnel that were transporting. Our private partners with our medical team, they were transporting, and just to have them showing up, it was a pretty crazy scene.
So you had talked about that. You had told me about the, I guess, the depth of the blood at that point, and just to hear that story, I can't imagine it. I really can't imagine being inside of a hospital, standing in blood that's that deep, and it's just crazy to hear. So you think about what was going on in those people's heads. You're constantly working, and granted, they're solid professionals and they're going to keep doing their job, but that's just one of those things that's kind of tough to cope with afterwards. So lots of training, lots of dealing with ghost calls, echo calls, responding to all those things. So Brian, I want to ask you, so at the beginning, Travis talked about leading that truck over to the level 1 trauma center that we have here. So you guys on the fire side, you guys know this better than anybody else, and we really don't get that training on the police side very often until we started doing more RTF training. But what's the biggest problem with somebody like Travis taking them over there, him just deciding where we're going to go to?
Well, he did a great job of going to the appropriate facility for something like this. Level 1 trauma, is the way to go. But number one is just knowing the capabilities of the hospital system that you work in and which hospital would be the appropriate destination. And number two is not giving them that advanced warning that patients are going to be coming in. So we, through the medical branch, we have that transportation group supervisor that we would assign as part of our ICS protocol and reach out to area hospitals, determine the number of beds, what their capabilities are, how many patients they could take, what the degree of severity of each one of those patients. So we try to give them that heads up of this is what's happening, this is what's going to be coming. And then the other thing that we do now, as a result of this incident is we staff hospitals with engine companies to help do that triage outside. So we have a hospital surge area command now that we'll put a battalion chief over, have him assign resources to the hospitals and just help triage and treat patients and make sure that people are getting to their appropriate destinations when they do show up in private vehicles or, another responder or something like that, to make sure that they're in the right place.
Yeah, so that's a big problem. That's something that I learned when we started doing these types of trainings and sending them out there. It's like that's the biggest problem where we'll overload a hospital's capability. And I think all of us on the streets just automatically think I'll just take or lead somebody over to whichever facility. That's one of the things that you guys in the fire service do. You'll actually phone ahead and let them know, hey, this is what I've got coming. And I guess in San Antonio, what they'll do is they'll actually talk to the dispatch center and figure out which center to take them to. So that's kind of one thing that nobody out there really realizes except for you guys.
Yeah, we teach that a little bit in this street level RTF class that we do, where we're really trying to pair up sergeants and captains in that initial response to start developing a unified command and some shared objectives and common operating picture between the two agencies, and then really push RTF to those transport areas and ambulance transport, because after action Aurora, Colorado is police will load up patients and transport them. I think there was 27 transported in that incident, but they're ending up at all sorts of different facilities.
Yeah. So you guys have told me a little bit about doing briefings afterwards. You said y'all started doing briefings to different organizations talking about the actual the 10-1 incident. When you guys started that, how long was that after the actual incident before you all gave the first briefing?
Dean?
Well, I think that when our emergency management started pushing out the first ones, I think it was probably about 6-7 months afterwards when they first started doing them. I think I took a trip to New York probably about 7-8 months afterwards when they started pushing them out to us to do them. It was fairly quickly.
Who was the host, or who were y'all pushing that out to?
There were all kinds of different agencies. I know I did one for their New York State Emergency Management, big training facility they had up north there. Been to a bunch of them. I wish I could tell you all of them. I can't remember. It's been a while, but
Start repeating the story over and over. I know that we've talked about the story several times. So once y'all started doing that, tell me about it, man. Do you feel like you go back there every time y'all talk about this? I know we've
I
talked
do.
about it. I know, Travis, you talk very emotionally about it. Do y'all go back to that same place, or are you able to kind of debrief it afterwards?
It's,
yeah.
I mean, you go back to it a little bit. You just try and allow people to learn from what it is that we went through, right? So, like, we're very prideful and proud of how we operate here in the Las Vegas Valley. And a lot of the questions that we get, Dean mentioned it earlier, is, well, how are you guys able to come together as LE and Fire? Like, how are you able to deal with that massive problem that night? And to do those debriefs, whether it be in a civilian setting, because you have civilian entities that want that information as well, to LE and Fire entities, to have the opportunity to kind of not teach, but just, discuss and have conversations about what took place that night and what it is that we did and what we could have done better and what it is that we think we did quite well, is always a benefit, but you're obviously going to relive it. Like, when you have service members that deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan, they deal with combat, the benefit is they get to come home. They don't have to deal with that scene anymore. Like, we're sitting within Mandalay Bay right now, and we, on every day, have to drive by the scene of the most horrific active shooting event our country's ever seen. And we have to relive it day after day after day living here. It's just a part of, what it is that we do. So anytime you kind of talk about it or teach about it, it's not that you're numb, but like, we live here and we deal with it, and like, we signed up for it. So you just try and push out as much quality information as we can to partnering agencies and people
Yeah,
that want it.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that people don't talk about enough, is that at a certain point in your first responder's career, I think at a certain point you do become numb. You become numb because you see the same types of things over and over again. It's very traumatic events. Every event we go to is a traumatic event to somebody. And you become emotionally numb to a lot of stuff out there. So in the aftermath, was there any type of resiliency training that you guys had to go to, or any kind of recovery training or counseling that you guys talked about?
We had our PEEP had called us and talked to us if we wanted to talk about our police employee assistance program and things like that. I had friends to talk to. The one nice thing that was very fortunate for me, not only that I had a wife that's involved in this kind of line of work, which was real good, because she can understand it as well, but I literally work with my two best friends. We've been together for 20 years. Same squads most times, so we hit each other up all the time, and that's what really helped us. We give each other a good ration of shit, if you will, about the mistakes we do and the things like that. So to have that and bounce it off each other was really good for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It helped me out quite a bit, and I think the biggest thing, not so much even seeing all the bodies laying there and having to. He talked about the guy holding him, his wife. We were sitting across from where a man was holding his pregnant wife who had died. We had a lady that was in a wheelbarrow that had died, and then several others that were all around it. Those were all around us. We had to sit and watch that. That wasn't so much what was getting to me, because being a police officer as many years as we have and seeing as much tragedy as we had seen, you kind of compartmentalize that it is what it is now, right?
Right.
The thing that stuck with me the most was hearing everybody's cell phone going off, because at a certain part of that night it was dead quiet, and being in Las Vegas, it's never that quiet on the Strip, ever, never that dead quiet, and it really was. And you could hear cell phones all night long ringing or dinging, text noises. That was kind of the eeriest thing I think I've ever heard, is just knowing that no one was going to answer those.
Yes.
And that was just kind of weird for me.
So you're talking about the actual victims' cell phones going off.
Yeah, victims and people, and
As
just
news started to get out, people checking on loved ones.
yeah, and boots people running out of there were boots everywhere, boots, cowboy hats, just, people ran out of their boots, and just to see that stuff there. And you're like,
Yeah, I saw those
wow.
pictures when they started talking about the concert. I saw those pictures of just shoes laying around on the concert floor. People were running right out of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty moving.
Each agency kind of did their own thing. So we had to go through kind of like the same process you would after an OIS. So our agency kind of treated it as a critical event.
That's an officer-involved shooting.
An officer-involved shooting.
Okay.
So there were 6 of us, I believe, Travis. We all had to go see the psychologist and then debrief with him and then kind of talk about the event and then kind of go through those protocols and then get back to work. Our major at the time did a very good job of trying to, hey guys, you're not coming back to work. Like we had all worked that event, didn't get relieved, like Dean and Bobby had mentioned, till early hours of the morning, and then we were all back on shift. I was back on shift at 1400 because all hands on deck. And then my major was like, no, you're good. Like you're gonna go home and decompress and kind of go see the shrink and kind of work through that process, and didn't allow some of us that were down there, in and around close proximity to the fairgrounds to come back to work right away. So
That's very uncommon. It's very uncommon for those stories to actually happen. Did you find those protocols actually useful to you? Do you all actually go back and talk about that afterwards?
I've talked about it. I was to say I was mildly upset would be an egregious understatement that he didn't allow me to come back to work. You've got every other police officer, firefighter, EMT in the valley working that day, trying to work through this problem, and then here I am getting told I have to go sit on a couch and talk to somebody I don't want to talk to about feelings or whatever, and it's just like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to go help out and go do something.
I think that's the call from most of us. We want to get back in the game and get after it. And also, most of us will take the tough guy road and kind of say, we really don't need to do that right now. Totally understandable. What were you going, Brian, you had something?
Yeah, our department brought everyone into the training center that had worked that event that night for kind of a critical incident stress debrief. So even these guys that had been up all night long dealing with the aftermath of this, they brought everybody in at relief 0800 and just, quick rundown of, hey, that was an extraordinary event. Hope everyone's doing okay, and just kind of had everybody talk through it a little bit. I know since I worked at kind of an off-strip station, they did send a bunch of people home, and I ended up working that next day to cover somebody that would have been working that second 48. And then the hardest part for me at the end of that was knowing that I hadn't responded to it, and then seeing all of my friends that were affected by it, and you almost develop this like survivor's guilt almost of not being available for that call and being there and seeing the guys that are younger or newer to the job or just haven't developed the resiliency that you have of 15 years of seeing people messed up, in every way imaginable and maybe not equipped. I think I'm probably at this point I'm as messed up as I'm going to be, and they can't send anything else my way, but, and just seeing your friends go through that struggle is really hard.
That I'll touch on that real quick. So Travis mentioned it earlier. So we had some colleagues of ours that, very explicitly stated afterwards that they were like, hey, they had the guilt of, I'm only working a ramp. Like I had nothing to do with the event. I was just on traffic. And then we had to have command go in and speak to them and be like, listen, like you holding a traffic post allowed 8 ambulances to get from point of injury to UMC trauma, saving those people's lives, right? Like you may not have put the tourniquet on, you may not have done the medical interventions, but what it is that you did holding that ramp absolutely saved lives. So it helped to kind of work through that. But we had a lot of folks that were kind of in that same boat. Like, hey, I did not respond, or I was off duty, or whatever the case may be. And there was like a level of guilt or, that they weren't able to get involved as much as they, wanted to and have trained for. And to see their partners kind of go through that was pretty hard for a lot of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tough thing. So training has always been a big thing for you guys. I know that the Las Vegas area has been real big in training. So how have you all changed up your training procedures or your prep for these types of events?
So a lot of things that we've done, we get with these hotel casinos quite a bit. We have protocols that we put in place with them as far as Go Bags, Pathfinder program that we put together with them that we're working on.
Can you explain the Go Bags, what you're talking about?
So part of our Go Bags, we have them in every hotel casino. They have things like keys, access cards, things to everything. So we can get into anything. You know as well as I do, Murphy's Law says that a bad guy can get into a spot, and for some reason we won't be able to get in that spot. So we have access to everything in there. They have maps of inside the facilities. Nothing real technical, just an overlay, so we can have an idea of where we're going. If someone calls out a room or an area of that hotel casino, we know how to get to it or have a general layout of it. A list of hazards that are inside there. Nothing small like little cabinets full of stuff, but big hazards that we need to know about. I joke around a lot, and it's kind of like the hunt for Red October. I need to know where things are inside there that don't react well to bullets.
Yeah.
That's what we want to put on these go bags. We like to let some of the outside security guards have access to things like that. So as we arrive, our officers can grab those and have comms inside the hotel casino to get there. Communications is delayed all the time. You know, it's got to go from them to our dispatch back out to us, and that takes time. Well, if we have direct communication with them, it's easier for us, quicker. That's where we're looking at things like that. That's part of the go bags that we're looking at.
So comms is definitely a problem, I guess, around the world. Comms is one of those problems that's hard to tackle. And for anybody that's ever stayed in any kind of a hotel anywhere, especially these very big high-rise hotels, your cell phone signal will disappear at most places. Well, general public doesn't realize that the same thing happens to our first responder radios that are high-dollar radios. So we have problems with comms inside of hotels. So you all have something set up. You know, you're trying to get around that problem. That's a big deal. But you talked about dispatchers and their level of professionalism and their ability. We all know that, I think, kind of to throw them in the rivalry with cops and firefighters. We all have the rivalry with dispatch, and we have to tread lightly on that one, of course. But who dispatched in that type of an incident, like what you all were doing on 10-1?
Everybody.
Everybody was on it.
So we have shared channels here within the Las Vegas Valley that we're still trying to work through the process of how we're going to implement that in the infancy of an event. But you're going to have Clark County Fire working their dispatch, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police working their dispatch, especially when you have an event channel and then obviously your area command channels. The Highway Patrol, we were working off our channels. So it can get very convoluted and kind of messy, but you're all getting quality information. So when you have integrated teams, you can share that information back and forth. Just sometimes, like Dean mentioned, it gets delayed. So Highway Patrol may have gotten a very pertinent piece of information. Well, instead of going from officer to trooper, and it has to go from trooper to dispatch, dispatch to dispatch, dispatch to officer. So there's that delay, which is unfortunate sometimes. But when you work with encrypted channels, it's just something that you kind of have to work around until you're all on the same shared comms. So it's.
What's the big changes that you've seen in the fireside training, Brian?
You know, I think, I don't know about changes. I think it's just having to continually do it, have it be a point of emphasis, because everyone has their annual stuff that they have to hit, you know, and how do you carve out time when you have all of these certifications and requirements to have a certain amount of training in, you know, this category or that, you know, but then still make time for the other things that are important. And if you're going to make it an annual refresher, you know, that has to be on the calendar for the annual block or something like that. So it's just, you know, we're constantly getting new guys in that haven't had this over years, you know, and we just did a survey. 40% of our guys have never had any RTF training. And this was only, you know, 3.5 years ago, but we're a young department and we're constantly getting younger. You know, our company officers are promoting, you know, young, and so it's just trying to carve out that time to just continue to hit the basics, you know, and just push forward with that.
I think one of the biggest changes you'll see, Eddie, and I don't want to speak for fire, but like they're present every day.
Yeah.
Like in our office, you're going to see your fire captain every single day. You're going to see Captain Eric Jones from City Fire every day. We would see him more if we could, right? Just because he's such an amazing asset. But you see those captains from those representatives from our fire agencies. You can talk about it all you want, but when they're present every day and they're hands-on, ingrained in training with both LE and firefighters, that's been the biggest change since after 10-1. Like we trained consistently prior to 10-1, but now we consistently have a fire captain in our office every single day, hands-on with our cops. it brings relevancy and credence to what it is that we're preaching as far as that multi-agency, multi-discipline response to an active assailant. So they're there every day now, and that's a credit to their commanders, right? You talk about your deputy chiefs and your chiefs that are allowing captains to be in those spots full time, and just what an amazing asset that is. You can't put a dollar amount on that. Like to
Right.
have Captain O'Neill there, to have Captain Eric Jones be there full time, the decision should never be based on dollars and cents. It should be based on what it is that we can do as far as the service to the constituents of the state of Nevada and the people that are responding here to this valley, and to have those stakeholders from those agencies be there every day. That's something that's been a benefit after the 10-1 event.
Yeah, so the participation and actually, like you said, the presence more than anything else. So, Brian, I'm going to give you the chance to do this. I know you asked me to let Eric come up here, and you said that he should be up here and have the chance to actually say something about what was going on. Tell me why. Before we bring him up, I'm going to let you bring him up.
Yeah, sure. Captain Eric Jones, LVFR. Come on up here, buddy. So, I'm a new member, to the MACTAC task force. And so a lot of the things that happened during this time and before, as we talk about this kind of implemented in 2012 moving forward, he was there for a lot of that as a guy that was sitting in my seat, prior to me. So
Awesome.
absolutely, Eric.
All right, so I'm going to let you all switch out. If you can just go ahead and set your headset down, and he'll take over your spot. Eric, I appreciate you patiently waiting, hanging out. We wanted to get you in here. Tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Eric Jones. I've been with Las Vegas Fire and Rescue for a little over 19 years. I've been running 911 calls for a little over 31 years. I served in the Army. I was a firefighter in the Army at 51 Mike. Did that in Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and Fairbanks. So Arctic firefighting is a lot of fun.
Wow.
Before that, I was in Los Angeles. Worked for a private MS company as an EMT and a paramedic as well.
So medical was your pursuit. You liked medical.
Yes, sir.
So tell me about your involvement. Tell me about what was going on with you in your life during the night of the 10-1 incident.
So I actually wasn't on duty that night.
Okay.
My dad actually called me and told me about it, and then I started watching it on the news and make phone calls and talk to some folks that I could about what was going on. So
Your big involvement in this group here, and it's a pretty big group, but your big involvement here has a lot to do with the training side, right?
yes, sir.
So tell me a little bit about the training and what part you take in it, and I guess how you've changed things up.
So I've been working with the MACTAC section, Bobby, Dean, and Bert, since probably about 2012. I did a lot of that because I saw the need for it on our side. The county was a little quicker to jump on board with the MACTAC program as far as integrating their folks to it. So for our agency, there was a few of us that took interest as well, but we kind of had to do it on our own time, which wasn't a big deal. We were happy to do that. So I was able to be part of the group that developed the RTF program with Dean and Bobby and Bert and all the agencies across the valley. So that was a big part of where I got my start in it. And then from there, obviously continued with the training piece, getting involved with drills, setting up drills, learning the program, learning the policy, being a part of that policy work group, and just going from there. And then eventually our agency put forth a position, law enforcement liaison officer position. I was chosen for that, and I did that for about 11 months, working with MACTAC. I was assigned to MACTAC, and we hit it hard doing training for the entire valley with all the fire and police agencies.
Awesome. So what have you changed personally since that night, since that 10-1 incident? Now, granted, you weren't out there with them, but what have you changed personally about whether it's the kit you carry or how you're training yourself on a personal basis? What have you done differently now?
So I still carry the same kit, the same tools. Again, being involved in this so long, we trained in, as Brian said, the box scenario. So our tools are the same, but my mindset has changed as far as what could be the problem. and what could happen.
What's your basic loadout on a day-to-day?
Being on the fire engine, we have advanced life support equipment, so I only carry an extra tourniquet personally, but otherwise it's the same gear that we would on any of our other vehicles.
So have you guys taken any steps, especially on the fire side, have you all done anything special to start training families? Like have you all spent more time training your family at home, spending more time doing drills with your kids or with your family?
So I had a company for a little while where I trained law enforcement officers in tactical medicine or patrol medicine, and my family was involved with that. So I did quite a bit of training with them, and then they were incorporated in that training of the law enforcement officers.
Awesome.
I'd have conversations with both my boys. They're 8 and 6, or about to be 8 and 6, and they both know how to apply CAT tourniquets. And I'd have conversations with both of their instructors, right? Because if one goes to kindergarten, the other's in 2nd grade, about why they have tourniquets in their backpacks, and they have ballistic backpacks, right? So so those are things that
Just like all the other kids?
not like
Right.
not like all the other
But this
kids,
guy-
right? So, but it started off as a game, obviously, and hey, can you tie this, around Daddy's leg, and then kind of working through like how to work the windlass and how to apply a tourniquet properly, and it's kind of speaks to where we are as a society that it's kind of tragic. You have to teach a 6-year-old how to apply a tourniquet. It's not something that you would ever envision wanting to have to do as a father, but to have those conversations about what happens if a bad person comes into your classroom, like what do you do, and how do you go ahead and stop a leg bleed, or how do you do that? Like it's things that you have to have those open levels of conversation, especially with educators. You hear stories obviously of Sandy Hook and what options children do have, especially at that age. And if I'm going to allow you to look over my children's well-being for those 7-8 hours a day, I want to make sure that we're capable enough to go ahead and teach them how to save lives or get out of there as quickly as they can, rather than kind of hide in a corner or hide under a desk and wait to be executed. So it's unfortunate you have to have those talks with children of that age, but if it helps save a life, then it is what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we as the first responders and as the parents, the leaders of your family, you guys have to kind of take steps to do that. We do that. I know my kids can do tourniquet drills. They do shoot and move drills. They do cover and move drills. They're great at that kind of stuff. But it doesn't just apply to a mass casualty incident. This is something that could happen when you're out hunting.
Yep.
This is something that can happen when you're in a ball game or anything else.
Yep.
So having basic life-saving skills, it's one of those confidence builders for everybody. I think the thing that happens with all groups like ours is everybody has a standard. I have my standard. All of you guys have a standard, and it's obvious that you all keep them pretty high. So they all came from somewhere. So I'm going to kind of lead us off, off of the subject, and kind of lead us back around to Casey's area, so we can hand it off to him here pretty soon. But so tell me a little bit about Dean. Tell me, who would you call? Who would the guys be or the people be on your personal Mount Rushmore? Who brought you here? Who got you to this point?
Well, there's a couple people, I guess. As far as where I'm at today, my grandfather was probably a big one. He was one that I always looked up to. He served in World War II and down-to-earth Italian guy. He won the Silver Star in World War II, saving some people in a tank running across a field, getting shot. I got hit and shot in World War II, and then came back and was working in a field, and the guy had shot and killed a cop. And as my grandpa was working in a field, guy held a gun to his head and said, "You're taking me somewhere," and got in a truck with my grandpa, and as we were driving up the field, or up the road, Grandpa was like, "No, you're not," and got in a fight with him, shot my grandpa in the head. He lived through that. That was when I was 1. He lived through that, and then when I became a cop, my grandfather grew me up. He taught me everything. And I remember I told him, I said, "Grandpa, I'm going to be a cop." He goes, "Look at me, Dean." He says, "Don't you go out there being no damn hero." He says, "Don't get shot. It don't feel good." I said, "Well, no, don't."
He was actually a subject matter expert. in
Yeah,
that, yeah.
he was pretty good. One of my first officers I worked for, one of my sergeants back home, Sergeant Kirchie, he, when I was a reserve officer, he really taught me a lot of stuff. He told me when I was just a baby cop, he says, "Look, Dean, not everybody needs to get a ticket. Not everybody needs to go to jail. Sometimes just needs you to be there to talk to them. That's all it needs. That kind of was up there for me. I'm like, all right, I get it.
Great advice.
I understand. Just other officers throughout the years, just meeting people that have taught me how to, you don't have to be that asshole every day. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Those have kind of been what's been important to me through
Yeah.
my life.
That makes sense. All right, Eric. So tell me about the best trainer that you've had along the way, or best training, class.
Well, that's tough. There's a lot. I was fortunate enough to go to the International School of Tactical Medicine in California. I also went to another class down in San Diego. I can't think of the name of the company now, but they do props for movies, and they train a lot of SF folks down there. And they have a whole village set up that looks like somewhere in the Middle East. And that was excellent training. They hired amputees. They had these blood systems that would bleed, and so the tactical medicine piece of that, treating someone while there's automatic gunfire and they would shoot RPGs at us, and all sorts of things like that with real life smells, and the actors did a great job. So just great immersive training with all those distractors. So that was a great program. I have to look it up, and I feel bad I forget their name. But International School of Tactical Medicine also did a great job. Very similar type training, a little more in depth than the other one, but it was just a different style of class.
Wow. Okay. So where do you go, I guess, when you go to books or podcasts or trainers, what's your go-to?
Wow. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts.
Sure.
This is odd, talking on a podcast.
Yeah. So where are your first?
So I go on the internet quite a bit. We also have quite a bit of programs for our agency, different learning platforms online. But gosh, think of I can't think of one to give you over another right now. I apologize.
That's okay. Just be prepared, because Eddie's got a whole bunch of other questions
I've
that
got
y'all
plenty
are
of
probably
questions.
not prepared for.
And I will circle back.
Okay.
Yes. All right. So what's one of the things that you think, going forward, Travis, what's one of the lessons or one of the messages you want to push out to the public to tell them about what happened that day, or what it is about training and the job in general?
I would say if we didn't learn anything else from that night, as far as being just a member of this community, is not just being in law enforcement, being a firefighter or a paramedic. It is up to every member of this community to have that life-saving training, even to a minimal level, to apply a tourniquet, stop bleeding, perform CPR, because we saw these heroic acts throughout that night. Your average person saved more lives than anybody sitting in this room that night. When you hear these stories of heroism, I mean, I saw one story where a young kid, 17 years old, I think, shot in the neck, and he saved 5 people. I saved one person, and I was paid to be out there.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible stuff. I like that message. Jake,
Sir,
tell me about your best car chase.
I'm not allowed to discuss
Oh, come
the P
on.
word. You can't say pursuit.
Can't say
anymore.
pursuit.
Can't say it anymore.
Attempt to overtake.
Attempt to overtake. Yeah, attempt to overtake. With the Highway Patrol, we've had a lot, so no more that's any more impactful than what every other agency is dealing with across the valley. And we've had some pretty impactful ones. Thankfully, no one's been hurt in the pursuits I've been involved with. We've been able to catch some. Some have gotten away. It's just the nature of law enforcement, kind of with what we're dealing with now. And
Yeah, absolutely.
but we've had some pretty impactful ones when Travis and I first were working graveyards together. Some ones that went the length of the valley with some pretty violent offenders, and based with some of our partnerships, we had Metro help us out on quite a number of them, and utilizing canine assets and air assets, and trying to get those folks meeting the corrections officers that they needed to meet. We were able to kind of facilitate that after those pursuits.
I can think of one where I know Jake was responding code to me, where I was in a pretty nasty fight myself, and he happened to have a ride along that night, and I think Jake was coming to me at a very high rate of speed, and I believe that ride along is still in therapy. But yeah, we had some exciting nights, and I remember Jake being not close to me, but being there very quickly.
Crown Vics, you can push them pretty hard. They hold up pretty well.
Yeah. They corner like they're on rails.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
exactly.
That's it. They hold up. They hold up quite well.
All right, Dean, tell me about the most famous person you've had any police interaction with.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that one. to tell you
All
the
right, we
truth.
can
I think-
pass by that
I
one. I
think
didn't mean to throw you on the.
might
Didn't mean to put you on the
still be-
spot.
Still be in litigation.
How about just tell me about the incident and not the person?
It involves some heavy drinking and maybe a lady in a room that wasn't supposed to be in a room, and several other male individuals that had their way with her.
I got you.
And he was a singer.
Got you. Totally understand it,
Yeah.
man. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll change it up a little bit. I'm coming back to you, Eric, because Casey was right. I still have stuff for you.
I bet.
Please ask him about his mustache. Ask him about his mustache.
How many years you say you have on here? 19 years?
With our department, 19 years.
19
sir.
years. So 19 years in the fire service. So actually, quite a bit more because you were a firefighter in the Army as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Who's the best cook you've ever worked with?
Oh, wow. I'd probably have to give it to a guy that's retired now, but his name's Brian Alexis.
What was his dish?
Everything. I can't give you a specific because everything he made was top notch, and he would even plate it at times for you and call you in as your dish was ready. Pretty impressive. There's a lot of good cooks. Don't get me wrong, but
Hold
Oh,
on, let
I
me
totally
let me
believe
change
you.
cameras to Jake just so he can confirm that actually happens at a fire department.
It does happen at a fire department.
Yeah,
That's right.
it does happen at a fire department.
That's it.
We joke a lot, cops and firefighters. We joke a lot, but you want the best meal, that's where you're going to find it.
Well, there's a 7-Eleven off of Sahara that will plate our hot dogs for law enforcement.
Nice.
Yeah, they're very good.
They're very good.
They warm your buns too.
It's true. It's true. It's
That's
fantastic.
That's a very good information. All right, favorite book, Jake?
I don't know. There's a lot. I read a lot. Mitch Albom books are good, and obviously, as a cop, you're always stuck reading, a lot of the Jocko stuff, and Dave Grossman, obviously, and kind of things that are impactful.
Motivational books.
There's leadership books.
Yeah.
Right. Like in law enforcement, you're a leader whether you want to be or not. So learning how to speak to people and how to articulate your message, whether you're conveying it to subordinates or your command team, or whether it be to the general public, I think is extremely important. So trying to get better at that every day, and being a student of this game, I think is extremely important. So whatever you can do to kind of read up on that is, if you're not doing that, you're doing your community a disservice. So a lot of times in any field, people get complacent. So to read books, like Jocko or Colonel Dave Grossman, it's just enhancing your skill set. And there's a reason why doctors practice medicine and lawyers practice law. Cops, we should be practicing our field and always continually striving to get better. So a lot of that comes with self-education.
Sure, absolutely. Travis, Dean, best books, favorite podcasts, favorite speakers?
I completely agree with everything that Jake was just saying about that, but my favorite book's probably something called Blood, Sweat, and Tea, and it's about being an amateur golfer breaking into the PGA and the after hours of that lifestyle. But entertaining read, but yeah, I guess it's not as appropriate for this environment.
Yeah, but it's something that breaks you away. Something that that's what you use. Yeah, man, absolutely. You got to have a separation from the day-to-day life of our grind, and then you have to have something. Dean,
Well, I'm actually more of a movie guy.
tell me about it.
Not much of a book reader. However, I did read Chuck Yeager's book years ago, and a couple things stuck with me. And one of the biggest things was a line where he says, "You do what you can for as long as you can, and when you can't, you don't quit. You just back up and take another path and continue on." And it always just kind of stuck with me, And I always kind of looked up to the guy. They just the whole fact that. He never really finished high school, so they say. He got his GED, and he never went to college. And they're like, you'll never be a NASA astronaut. And wow, look who he was.
yeah.
Yeah.
NASA kind of missed a ball on that one, as far as I'm concerned. And he's an amazing man.
Sure, absolutely.
So that was it. Other than that, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Let's go. Come on, let's do this thing.
Every day you can watch
Right?
that one.
I could watch that movie 1 billion times. I love it.
Casey, what do you think? What do you have for him?
No, I think we touched on a lot of really good subjects, and I really appreciate everything that's going on because I'm just the guy sitting here listening and making sure everybody's going to be able to hear you. Jake, I want to address something with you because it's obviously that you're embedded with a distinctive training environment that's specific to this valley, and you're surrounded by people that you've done this with. And you've also traveled across the United States with Alert to train other people. Can you give me some similarities and differences of what you've experienced here and what you experience elsewhere? Because this is a big metropolitan area. Eddie and I came from, big metroplexes and stuff like that. We talked a little bit about MacTac, where it works for small cities and, and small departments and stuff like that. But tell me some of your experiences about that, because I think a lot of people listening are listening to this story about what happened here. And we talked about how, training beforehand and how it's going to be impacted later. Give me some experience on that.
As far as similarities go, I think that the the level of professionalism that you find here within the Las Vegas Valley and the level of commitment and the willingness to go ahead and give up things within your personal lives to enhance those that you work with, you find within the adjunct community with Alert, right? So as far as similarities go, like when we travel with Alert, right, what am I giving up? I'm giving up time with my family. I'm giving up time with my agency. I'm giving up time with people that I care about. Well, the people that are sitting at this table do that every day. Like Dean, Bert, and Bobby have been doing it for a decade with Metro and giving up their weekends and giving up their time and not being able to go to kids' birthdays and not being able to do all those things. But if it's important for you to train those that you work with in that level of professionalism and commitment, it's something that you find here in the Valley, and it's something that I've experienced with Alert, right? So it's if you're committed to the job, I think that you'll see that across fire, LE, EMS, it doesn't matter. So like I've been extremely fortunate to be a part of that community, right? Like to have these guys that didn't have to be like, hey, let's welcome in a state trooper, or, let's bring other people into the mix, and to have the relationships with our fire captains and our fire partners. I'm fortunate enough, and I say it pretty consistently, to surround myself with people who know more than I do, right? Like these two gentlemen right here, as far as what they've done in the Valley, have forgotten more about active assailant response than I've learned to this point. And I get the benefit to go ahead and learn off of them on a pretty consistent and daily basis, right? And it's not about pay grade or rank or what you can pin on your collar, stars and bars or bugles. It's just about the message and how you can deliver it. And that is very similar, whether I'm in Sanford, Florida, or, Ohio or Connecticut or here within the Las Vegas Valley. Like professionals are going to act professional, and they're going to go ahead and convey that message. So it's extremely similar. Also, the desire to want to learn. Every cop, firefighter, EMS, anybody that's in this types of professions, they want to do their job at a high level. They want to be trained. They want to receive instruction so that they can go out and serve their communities. Just try and provide it in a manner in which is conducive for them to learn, and it's whether, like I said, it's a traveling show or it's here local. There's a lot of similarities. So,
Dean, what you got?
I just wanted to kind of get on with that too, that some of the stuff that Jake brings as well from what he sees across the country, we like to bring in here as well. It's not just about what we teach here. We're open to bringing in anything. I mean, we just want to make it better. That's what we want to do, and I think that happens across the country. And I would be extremely remiss if I didn't mention a couple people that were extremely significant to our program here, MacTac itself. The first one is Alan Beck. Alan Beck was one of the first ones that helped start this program. When it first started, it was just Alan and I and Joel Martin sitting inside a little room to try to get this program started for this department. And unfortunately, Alan was gunned down at CC's Pizza years ago in 2014. And then the last is Adrian Crandall, who was on our team for a while. He, when we were sitting around one day, he's like, why aren't we working with the fire department? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, what? We should be working with the fire department. I'm like, well, let's start looking at this. And that's kind of where the ball started rolling for us as far as Rescue Task Force. So to not mention them, I think, would be a disservice to them. They really were the ones that have kind of helped us all get going on this. So I should definitely mention them.
Yeah.
And I'll ask all y'all this, with him saying that, were y'all officers lower ranking at the time when y'all came up with this and then had to go through a chain of command to actually get that thing going?
I don't think I can get any lower than I am right now. This is about the basement for me. It's a pinnacle of my career right here. But yeah, everything we've done, we've had to push and push and push, and it's about having the right people in the right place at the right time. And we've been very fortunate that through the process of creating MACTAC for our department, we've been good. We've met some resistance on the way, and we've had some other people who have pushed us very hard, and it's been good. I mean, I don't think anything's ever going to be easy.
Sure.
So
You're starting to see it now, like not in this room obviously, but there's murmurs with some of our colleagues, like we've experienced our event. So what is the need for future training, right? And having those open levels of dialogue with your command is extremely important. Same thing like Dean mentioned, like I've been fortunate enough to work for a command team that for whatever reason, one way or another, they kind of listen to my feedback. So when I say that we need to implement more MACTAC training and have it standardized for everybody, I've been fortunate enough to have lieutenants and captains and majors that have been like, yep, absolutely, I agree with you. So to have that support's been really good. But it's predominantly, I know it sounds crazy, but you look at Dean, Bert, and Bobby as patrol officers. Myself, I was just a basic trooper. Travis is a trooper. And for a lot of our agencies here in the Valley, like it's driven by people that are boots on ground. But how else would you, like I wouldn't want it any other way. Like at the end of the day, like I absolutely respect rank and people who work above me and they have to make decisions that are far above my pay grade. And I would never want to sit in those chairs because I don't know what they know. But when it comes to tactics and what it is that we have to respond to on a daily basis, a lot of times people are removed for quite a while, right? So they don't know what we know. So to have that dialogue back and forth to feed off each other is really beneficial in the Valley.
Sure. Anything from the fireside?
I would echo the same thing. I was a captain when I started getting involved in it, and really as it came to the forefront of being a thing. And we've had some really strong support, I'm talking for my agency, and some not as strong support. But overall, our agency really backs this program as far as utilizing it, having an SOP for it or a policy for it, and doing training, recurrent training with our partners within the Valley. Chief Cooper, our special operations chief, really pushes it hard and is a big proponent for it, and makes sure that it continues to be an ongoing thing with our agency, and not just ours, but the partnership we share with the other fire departments within the Valley, especially the county, because we run with them more than any of the others.
And Casey, if I can touch on something real quick. Like you talk about those partnering relationships, it's not just LE, fire, and EMS. So you talk about critical incident management. We dispatch tow companies to every critical event we have now, and it's not predominantly to deal with offender vehicles or subject vehicles. It's to tow cops vehicles, right? Because we park terribly, right? So you talk about like having those relationships and just open dialogue with people, stakeholders in your valley or where it is that you live and work. Whoever's listening to this, like if you're not reaching out to those people because you're too prideful or you're afraid to have those conversations, like please like reach out to those people and build those relationships. When we have a critical event, like we're going to dispatch tows to come assist us, whether it be ingress or egress or getting cops vehicles out of the way or whatever we need. And we didn't really think about that so much prior to 10-1 when you've got 600 cops coming in parking on center medians on Las Vegas Boulevard and parking wherever they could, but it's lessons learned. So those relationships are going to drive your response and the success or failure of your response. Those relationships and communication are going to kind of dictate how successful you are.
So funny that Jake brings that up. One of the things that we've tried to push over the last several years is with the community and doing these presentations and stuff that we do out in the community. We've met with every school, business, nightclub. We go out and do presentations for them, and it may be something simple as the run, hide, fight, something along that lines. But we get with them, we do the mapping program for them so we know what their building looks like and have response to them. We push our PSU, our problem-solving units, or our community-oriented policing units out to them so they meet with them, so they have an ownness into their response. So they know that, those first few minutes, those critical minutes, you need to take care of yourself a little bit before we can even get there. We want them, the businesses and the community of Vegas here itself, to be able to understand what our response is so they know what's coming and they can take care of those first critical minutes until we can get to them.
Yeah, that's big. So we'll kind of close things off. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and really appreciate all your time. One of the things that we've done in the program is we've expanded into this e-learning side, and Casey's heading that up. So we've spoken a lot about the RTF model. And if you guys are in our industry, in the first responder industry, or a fire guy, a police guy, one of the admin guys, if you want to learn a little bit more about RTF, the Marty Adcock, who's one of our regional managers, he put together a great webinar, and it's loaded up on our website. You can find it over there. He has a great sit down with the Austin area guys and how they use the RTF model. They have festival after festival, after incident after incident, and it's been a great test run for pretty much anything that we've come up with. They've put it to good work, so we want to do that. I'll remind everybody, guys, all you guys, keep training, keep your standards high, and keep doing what you're doing. We really appreciate you being here, Casey.
Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it. Anybody have anything else before we sign off?
No, brother. Thanks for
for
having
having
us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. And we are out.